The distress call. The crystalline towers of Raylia Prime gleamed under the light of 3 moons, their surfaces reflecting the artificial constellations created by orbital defense platforms. For centuries, the Raelian Confederation had prided itself on sophistication and diplomacy, developing technology that harmonized with the gentle environment of their homeworld. Their slender bodies, standing nearly 3 meters tall with translucent skin that revealed the complex network of luminescent circulatory systems beneath, had evolved in the perfect gravity and atmosphere of Raylia Prime. Ambassador Zella stood at the observation deck of the High Council spire, her 4-fingered hands trembling slightly as she studied the tactical displays. The luminescent patterns beneath her skin pulsed with anxiety, a biological betrayal of her emotional state that no Raelian could hide. "They've consumed the Thelos system," Science Director Vereen said, his voice a melodic whisper that belied the horror of his words. 17 billion lives, gone in less than an orbital cycle. Zella's inner membranes closed over her large, sensitive eyes briefly. "Show me the projected path." The holographic display shifted, revealing a horrifying trajectory. The Void Swarm, a collective hive consciousness of insectoid beings that traveled through space in massive organic vessels, was methodically consuming its way through their sector of the galaxy. Each system they encountered was stripped of all organic and mineral resources, leaving nothing but dead husks of planets orbiting silent stars. 6 cycles until they reach our system, Defense Coordinator Miran said, her voice tight with controlled panic. "Our evacuation capacity can only accommodate 20% of our population at most." "And the Galactic Council's response?" Zila asked, though she already suspected the answer. "They've offered condolences and refugee status for our leadership," Political Director Thask replied, his skin flickering with patterns of disgust. "They consider the Void Swarm an unstoppable natural disaster, not an enemy that can be defeated." Zella turned away from the displays, looking out at the beautiful city below where millions of Raelians continued their daily lives, unaware that their civilization was counting down to extinction. The Raelian Confederation had built their society on harmony, art, and scientific advancement. They had no standing military, only a defense force equipped to handle minor piracy and natural disasters. "There is one option we haven't discussed," Zila said quietly. The room fell silent, the collective luminescence of her colleagues dimming in apprehension. "Earth," she continued, turning to face them. "We contact the humans, the Deathworlders." Vereem's skin flashed with alarm patterns. That would be trading one destruction for another. Earth was classified as a Class 12 Death World in the Galactic Registry, a planet so hostile that most spacefaring species couldn't survive its crushing gravity, volatile atmosphere, and extreme climate variations. Its inhabitants, consequently, had evolved into what many in the galactic community considered monsters. Dense-boned endurance predators with remarkable resilience and a documented history of intraspecies warfare. "I studied them," Zella countered. "Yes, they're violent by our standards. Yes, their history is blood-soaked. But they possess qualities we need desperately. They're innovative, adaptable, and they have something no other species I've encountered possesses." "And what's that?" Thask asked skeptically. "A seemingly irrational drive to protect those weaker than themselves," Zilla replied. "They call it many things: heroism, compassion, duty, but it manifests as a willingness to face death for strangers. I've seen their historical records. Time and again, they rush toward danger rather than away from it when others are threatened." The council debated for hours as the holographic displays continued tallying the inexorable approach of the Void Swarm. Finally, with no better alternative, they authorized a direct appeal to Earth. In the communications center deep within the council spire, Zila personally composed the message. She included all their data on the Void Swarm, their biology, ship compositions, attack patterns, and the devastating aftermath of their consumption. She added the coordinates of the Raelian system and a simple plea: "Our civilization faces extinction. We humbly request any assistance Earth can provide. Transmitting now, the communications officer announced. Signal sent on all frequencies used by Earth vessels. Zella watched the message indicator pulse outward on the display. Now we wait, she said softly. 4 days passed. The void swarm consumed another system, the mining colonies of Pelris, with their 2 million inhabitants. Evacuation of Raelia began, though everyone knew it was largely symbolic. Messages of sympathy arrived from across the galaxy, but no offers of military aid. Then a transmission arrived from Earth. The Council gathered quickly, their skins pulsing with nervous anticipation as the communication officer established the connection. The holographic display flickered and resolved into the image of a human female. Her skin was dark brown, her hair cropped close to her skull, and she wore a uniform adorned with symbols the Raelians didn't recognize. "This is Admiral Helena Diaz of the United Earth Defense Force," she said, her voice deep and steady. "We have received your distress call and analyze your data package. Be advised. Earth stands with Raelia. Hold your position. Fleet will arrive in 5 standard days." The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. 5 days, Moran whispered. "The swarm will reach our outer defense perimeter in 4. They're sending a fleet." Thas gasped, incredulous. Earth has interstellar military capacity. Their technological advancement has been underestimated, Zila admitted. They've been deliberately minimizing their presence in galactic affairs. But will they arrive in time? Vereen asked the question hanging in everyone's mind. Zila had no answer. She simply returned to her window, watching the city below where evacuation was turning to panic, and whispered, "Hurry." 3 days later, the first tendrils of the void swarm appeared at the edges of the Raelian system. Massive organic ships, each the size of a small moon, emitted clouds of smaller craft that began methodically breaking down the outermost planets for resources. The Raelian defense forces engaged, but their elegant ships and precise energy weapons seemed merely to irritate the swarm rather than halt it. On the 4th day, as the swarm approached the habitable zones of the system, the Raelian High Council gathered in the Planetary Defense Center. Displays showed the devastation spreading through their system. 2 outer planets already reduced to debris fields, billions of tons of material being absorbed into the massive swarm ships. Still no sign of the humans. Thas gasped, not bothering to hide the accusation in his voice. "Nothing," Moran confirmed, her skin gray with despair. As the words left her mouth, alarms blared across the defense center. New contacts were appearing on the long-range sensors, not at the system's edge where they expected the humans to arrive, but behind the void swarm. "What's happening?" Zella demanded. "Something's emerging from subspace," the sensor operator reported, confusion evident in her voice. "Multiple signatures, hundreds, thousands of them." The main display shifted to show a section of space behind the swarm. A swirling rift had opened, not one large portal as Raelian ships would create, but thousands of smaller ones, each disgorging a vessel. "Are those human ships?" Vereen asked, squinting at the display. They were unlike anything the Raelians had expected. There were warships, yes, sleek, angular vessels bristling with weapon mounts, but they were vastly outnumbered by what appeared to be civilian craft of every conceivable design. Mining ships with massive equipment arms, cargo haulers, what looked like oceanic vessels retrofitted for space, even recreational craft. "Incoming transmission," the communications officer announced. Admiral Diaz's face appeared on screen. Behind her, a command center hummed with activity as humans moved purposefully between stations. "Raelian High Council, the United Earth Defense Fleet has arrived," she announced. "I apologize for the delay. Mobilizing civilians takes time." "Civilians?" Zila echoed, uncomprehending. Diaz's face split into what Zila recognized as a human smile, a disconcerting display of teeth that nonetheless conveyed positive emotion. "When we broadcast your distress call across Earth, the response was, Overwhelming, Diaz explained. Our military vessels form the core of this fleet, but they're accompanied by over 15,000 civilian ships that volunteered for this mission. Volunteered, Fask interrupted. For combat, against the Void Swarm. Correct. Every ship you see has been retrofitted with military-grade shields and weapons where possible, Diaz confirmed. Every person crewing them chose to come. Some for glory, some for adventure, some because it's the right thing to do, all knowing the risks. The display split to show the human fleet organizing itself into formation. As the Raelians watched in stunned silence, the thousands of mismatched vessels formed a coherent battle group and accelerated toward the Void Swarm. But why? Zila finally asked. Why would your people risk their lives for strangers? Admiral Diaz's expression grew serious. Ambassador, throughout human history, we've learned one truth. The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. We will not do nothing. We will not watch another civilization fall when we have the power to stand and fight. She paused, then added more softly, besides, if we let the swarm consume your system, they'll just keep going until they reach others. Maybe Earth eventually. Better to draw the line here, with you. The tactical display showed the human fleet closing rapidly with the Void Swarm. The massive organic vessels were turning, seeming to register the new threat for the first time. We've analyzed your data on the swarm, Diaz continued. We have a plan, but I need your people to hold the line at your inner defense perimeter for 12 more hours while we implement it. 12 hours, Moran repeated. We can try. Good, Diaz said, her smile returning, smaller now, more determined. Then let's introduce these hive-minded planet eaters to humanity's response when someone threatens innocent life. Her eyes locked with Zilla's through the transmission. We call it the Extinction Protocol. The transmission ended, leaving the Raelian Council staring at the tactical display as the human fleet, the most mismatched, improbable, and determined armada the galaxy had ever seen, charged headlong toward an enemy that had consumed entire civilizations. As Zilla watched, she felt something she hadn't experienced in days. Hope. Operation Extinction Protocol. Captain Maya Rodriguez's knuckles whitened as she gripped the command chair of the U.S. Thermopylae. The destroyer, one of Earth's newest military vessels, led a battle group of 20 ships, only 3 of which were actual warships. The rest were a hodgepodge of civilian vessels retrofitted with military hardware in the 5 frantic days since the Raelian distress call had reached Earth. All ships in formation, her XO reported. The civilian vessels are holding position remarkably well. They've been drilling nonstop during the journey, Maya replied, allowing herself a moment of pride. Fishing boat captains, cruise ship pilots, cargo haulers, turns out the skills translate better than anyone expected. On her tactical display, the full scope of Operation Extinction Protocol unfolded. The human fleet had divided into hundreds of small battle groups like hers, each assigned specific targets within the Void Swarm's formation. The plan wasn't to engage the swarm in a traditional battle. That would be suicide. Instead, Admiral Diaz had developed a strategy that played to human strengths: adaptability, unpredictability, and a willingness to take insane risks. Swarm vessels adjusting course, the tactical officer announced. They're responding to our approach. As expected, Maya said, all ships, execute pattern Sigma on my mark. The massive organic ships of the Void Swarm were turning, their surfaces bristling with organic weapons that began spitting globs of corrosive material and energy pulses toward the approaching human fleet. But instead of forming a defensive formation, the human vessels scattered in seemingly random patterns, making it impossible for the swarm to concentrate fire. Mark, Maya ordered. Her battle group exploded into action. The Thermopylae and the other military vessels accelerated directly toward the nearest swarm ship, while the civilian vessels broke off in different directions. To the Void Swarm, it must have looked like panic. the smaller, weaker ships fleeing while the warships launched a suicidal attack. It was exactly what they wanted the swarm to think. "The swarm is focusing on military vessels," the comm officer reported. Civilian ships reporting minimal engagement. Maya nodded grimly. Phase 1 proceeding as planned. Tell the civilians to begin their runs. Across the battlefield, the same pattern repeated with hundreds of battle groups. The Void Swarm, a hive mind used to facing organized military resistance, couldn't comprehend the chaotic human approach. It focused its attention on the obvious threats, the warships, while dismissing the civilian vessels as inconsequential. That was the first critical misunderstanding that would cost the swarm everything. Aboard the mining vessel Broken Hill, Captain Wei Chen watched his target grow larger on the view screen. Once, his ship had carved up asteroids for precious metals. Today, it would use those same tools for a very different purpose. All mining lasers at full charge, his engineer reported. Drilling arms extended and ready. Begin recording. Wei ordered calmly. If we don't make it back, I want Earth to know exactly how these things die. The Broken Hill accelerated toward a specific point on the massive swarm vessel, a node identified in the Raelian data as potentially critical to the ship's nervous system. Defensive tentacles lashed out, splattering acid across the mining ship's reinforced hull. Shields holding at 60%. The engineer called out. We can make it. All power to forward thrust, Wei ordered. Prepare to engage all mining systems on my mark. The Broken Hill slammed into the swarm ship's surface, its reinforced hull designed to withstand asteroid impacts. The drilling arms plunged deep into the organic material as the mining lasers, normally used to precision-cut valuable minerals, began carving through the swarm ship's tissue. We're in. Wei shouted over the groaning of stressed metal. Deploy the package. His crew worked with practiced efficiency, deploying the special cargo they'd brought from Earth, a custom-engineered biological agent developed in the 5 days since receiving the Raelian data. Based on Earth's understanding of hive mind organisms and the Raelians' detailed scans, Earth's best xenobiologists had created what they hoped would be a perfect weapon against the swarm. Package deployed. The engineer confirmed as the ship's systems pumped the agent deep into the swarm vessel's circulatory system. Withdrawing now. The Broken Hill tore free from the swarm ship's flesh, its engines straining as it pulled away. Behind it, the infection point glowed briefly, then began to spread. A network of luminescent veins radiating outward through the organic ship. All across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. Cruise ships that once carried tourists through Earth's oceans now rammed into swarm vessels, their reinforced hulls deploying specialized weapons. Cargo haulers designed to move mountains of material between planets now delivered payloads of destructive agents directly into the swarm's vital systems. Racing yachts, retrofitted with enhanced engines, darted between the massive tentacles, deploying smaller packages at specific points before speeding away. Aboard the Thermopylae, Maya watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction. Phase 1 complete, she reported to Admiral Dias. 83% of civilian vessels have successfully deployed their packages. We're sustaining heavy losses among military vessels drawing fire, but it's working. Begin Phase 2, Dias ordered, her voice steady despite the reports of destroyed Earth ships scrolling across her screen. Signal the Raelians to pull back to their homeworld. The battle shifted as the human warships that had been engaging the swarm directly began strategic withdrawals, pulling the swarm's attention toward the Raelian homeworld. The organic ships, seemingly unaffected by the civilian ships' attacks, pursued eagerly, sensing victory. That was the swarm's second critical misunderstanding. The biological agent needed time to work. Deep within the organic vessels, the engineered pathogen was spreading through their systems. Designed specifically to target the neural networks that allowed the swarm to function as a hive mind, it didn't kill the individual organisms immediately. Instead, it isolated them, breaking the connections that made them part of the greater consciousness. 6 hours into the battle, the effects became visible. The massive swarm ships began moving erratically. Some fired on empty space. Others turned on their own kind. "It's working," Vereen whispered in the Raelian Defense Center, watching the displays with disbelief. "They're losing coordination." Zila nodded, her skin pulsing with cautious hope. "The humans call it divide and conquer." They couldn't match the swarm's strength, so they attacked its ability to function as one entity. On the tactical display, the battle had transformed. The human fleet, despite heavy losses, had regrouped and was now methodically targeting the confused and isolated swarm vessels. Without their hive mind to coordinate defenses, the organic ships were vulnerable to conventional attacks. "Incoming transmission from Admiral Diaz," the communications officer announced. The Admiral's face appeared, streaked with sweat and what appeared to be blood from a head wound. Behind her, her command center was damaged, with emergency lights flashing. "The extinction protocol is in final phase," she reported. "The biological agent has successfully disrupted their hive mind. We're moving in to finish this." "Your losses?" Zila asked, dreading the answer. Diaz's expression hardened. 37% of our fleet. We've lost 4,816 ships." She paused, then added, "Every crew knew the risks. Every captain volunteered. Not one has retreated." The tactical display showed the remaining human vessels forming new attack patterns, systematically targeting the disoriented swarm ships. Without their coordinated defenses, the once invincible Planet Eaters were being methodically dismantled by the smaller, more agile human vessels. 12 hours after the battle began, the last swarm ship collapsed in on itself, its vital systems corrupted beyond repair by the human biological agent. The space around Raelia Prime was filled with debris, the remains of swarm vessels, and, tragically, thousands of human ships. In the aftermath, as the Raelian High Council welcomed Admiral Diaz and her surviving captains to their world, Zila finally asked the question that had been burning in her mind since the first human ships had appeared. "Your people knew the cost would be high," she said. "Yet they came anyway. Thousands died to save a species they'd never even seen before. Why?" Admiral Diaz looked out at the gathering of human captains, military officers standing shoulder to shoulder with former cruise directors, fishing boat captains, and cargo pilots. All wore the same expression of exhausted pride. "Ambassador Zila, humans evolved on a world that tried to kill us every day," she explained. "Predators, diseases, natural disasters. We survived it all. And in that struggle, we learned something profound. The strongest survival trait isn't physical strength or even intelligence. It's cooperation, standing together against threats." She gestured to the captains. "We've spent our history fighting each other, yes, but when faced with an external threat, humans unite. We apply that same principle to the galaxy. Your people are now part of our extended community, and humans protect their own." Captain Wei Chen, his mining uniform still stained with swarm fluids, stepped forward. "My grandfather used to tell me stories about ancient Earth sailors," he said. "When a ship sent a distress call, every vessel that received it would change course to help, regardless of nationality or purpose. It was called the Law of the Sea. We've simply extended it to the stars." A cruise ship captain nodded in agreement. "When you sent that call, you became family. And family shows up." As the humans and Raelians began the long process of rebuilding, word spread throughout the galaxy. The species from the Death World, long avoided and feared, had sacrificed thousands of their own to save a civilization they barely knew. The Void Swarm, thought invincible, had been utterly destroyed. 2 standard months later, as the last human recovery vessels prepared to return to Earth, Zela stood with Admiral Diaz in the High Council chamber. "The Galactic Council has requested a formal alliance with Earth," Zila informed her. "After millennia of keeping humans at arm's length, they're suddenly very eager for your protection." Diaz laughed. "I imagine they are." "And your response?" "We'll consider it," Diaz said. "But our priority will be direct agreements with civilizations like yours." People who recognize that in this dangerous universe, the strong have a responsibility to protect the vulnerable. Zilla's skin pulsed with patterns of gratitude. The Raelian people will never forget what humanity did for us. Our histories will remember this as the day the Deathworlders became our greatest allies, and we'll remember it as the day we gained friends worth fighting for. Diaz replied. In the end, that's what makes any species truly dangerous. Not their weapons or their strength, but what they're willing to risk everything to protect. As the human ships departed, their images were broadcast across Raelia Prime. Millions of Raelians watched, their skin glowing with patterns of respect and gratitude, as the most dangerous fleet the galaxy had ever known. Dangerous not for its weapons, but for the unshakable determination of its crews, returned to the death world that had forged them. And in countless homes across the Raelian Confederation, children began asking their parents to tell them stories about the humans, the strange, resilient species that had answered a desperate call and brought extinction not to the Raelians, but to those who had threatened them.